Hi class, this is Mary Moen, your instructor, and this video recording is going to be an overview of the Focus on Assessment assignment. So here I am in our class LSC596 Brightspace page, and I went to the Assignments tab and I get to my assignments. So right here you're going to see the Focus on Assessment assignments. This first link is a description of the assignment, which I'll go into, but I also want you to notice these attachments. So I have a template for you to fill in to complete the assignment. There's a rubric on how you're going to be graded for this assignment. And then I actually have 3 examples of student work. So first we're going to look at the actual assignment. And so the purpose of this Focus on Assessment assignment is to provide opportunities to explore, use, and reflect on different types of assessment strategies that can be used in the context of a school librarian. Now, due to COVID, students in spring of 2021, you only need to choose 3 of the 6 assessment types to complete this assignment. And so now let's go to the assignment. So here is the assignment, the purpose of the assignment, the description, and I'm going to jump down to the 6 assessment types that you're going to have to show, or you're going to choose 3 of these 6 to show to complete this assignment. So there's the first one is that you're able to use multiple formative assessments that build on each other and lead to a summative assessment. The second one you could choose is evidence of students using some self-assessment strategies. The third one you could choose from is assessment strategies that accommodates differences among learners. The fourth one could be examples of student work and how you communicate feedback to the student on what they've learned and their results. The fifth one is using student work to inform the effectiveness of your teaching. And the sixth one is using assessment information to plan instruction for one person, one student, or for another class. So those are the 6 types. So what I've done here is I've given you suggested assessment strategies for each type, and I've also given you ideas for what evidence you could use to show you did this particular assessment strategy. And I also want you to reflect on these experiences for each one of these assessment types. So I have some reflection prompts. So the type, the suggested assessment strategies, and the evidence you could use to show you did this, and a reflection. So for the first one, multiple formative assessments that build on each other. I mean, there's tons of formative assessments. There's a handout, 60 formative assessments and other things. And you can also think of a summative assessment. And, you know, we don't do a lot of a summative assessment in the library, but if there's a project where you could have a rubric, have students reflect, or some kind of product or a test, that would be great. And your evidence could be, you know, the lesson plan that, you know, and that shows the strategies, the assessment strategies listed. You could actually show me the assessment instruments if that's applicable, and then you would reflect on it. The second one, student self-assessment strategies. Well, suggested strategies would be to have them reflect, write a 1-minute paper, do an exit ticket, a checklist, journal on their progress, things like that. And so evidence would be like the assessment strategies listed in your lesson plan, and if you had any instruments that you could link to or take a screenshot of. And there's the reflection prompts. So the third one, assessment that accommodates differences among learners. So ideas to show this would be, you could give them an option whether they speak, handwrite, draw, keyboard their answers, or show their learning. Or you could, like if you had ELLs, you could say, well, ELLs, they'll meet the standard if they, you know, do this, and maybe not count spelling, But for people who aren't ELLs, to meet the standard, they would have to have things spelled correctly. That's just an example of changing the competency level expectation for different types of learners. And again, you could get this, if this were in your lesson plan and the strategies listed, and you can link to the instruments if applicable, and you have your reflection questions for this one. Number 4, you can, using student work and the teacher's evaluation, to show that you can provide detailed record of what the student has learned and that you're communicating feedback to the students. So here's the suggested assessment strategies. You can use formative and summative strategies, exit tickets, you can write comments on student work, you can have a shared rubric, and here's the evidence that you could have for this and the prompt. All right, number 5, student work is evaluated and used to inform effectiveness of your teaching. The easiest way to do this is a pre and post test. You could also write a reflection, viewing student work, and you can also look at, well, maybe in my lesson plan, my assessment wasn't really aligned to my student learning objective. So maybe I need to either change my assessment or tweak my learning objective. And here's the types of evidence that you could supply in the prompt for the reflection. And the 6th one is that you are able to use assessment information to plan instruction for an individual student or for the next class. So if you've taught a class, you'd stop and say, wow, what went well, what didn't go well, how might I use this information next time I teach it. And actually, this is a pretty easy one for librarians, especially at the elementary level, because you tend to teach the same lesson multiple times. So after the first time you teach it, you should stop and reflect on what went well, what should you do differently, and then the next time you teach it, you can implement those changes, and then you will have shown this one. So now I'm going to show you the template that you are going to use to complete the assignment. Okay, so here it is. So here's the first one. And again, you're just going to pick 3 of the 6. So multiple formative assessments that build on each other and lead to summative assessment. So your evidence could be a brief description of the lesson and learning and student learning objectives. You should list your assessment strategies, and you can screenshot or link to assessment instruments if applicable. So you're going to figure out how to show me that you did this, and then there's a spot for your reflection to respond to the prompts that I have in that other document I just showed you. And so again, for the next one, if you're using student self-assessment, I give you examples of evidence. You can reflect, and kind of keeps going down. Evidence, the kinds of evidence you can use, and there's a spot for reflection. So let's look at what this looks like in a real example of student work. Okay. All right. So this student, for number 1, they had a lesson plan, and they described it. They had the learning objectives. They had the standards. You don't really need those, but the student did that. They listed the assessment strategy. So this is the one where you have multiple formative assessments that lead up to a summative. So she here lists the formative assessments, questionings. They're working on something. There's discussion. And then her summative was, she had a exit ticket, and it was like a quiz, really, and the scores were visible. And so she linked to the Google form, and then she actually did some screenshots of the results of the summative assessment, the Google form. And she wrote, you can see it's a 1 paragraph to respond to this experience. For student self-assessment strategies, she actually worked really hard. The Collaborative OWL research project was like a major project she worked on while she was doing her student teaching. So she has a formal lesson plan for this, but she's also kind of giving me a quick student learning objectives. She's listing the standards, although that's not necessary for this assignment. But she does list the assessment strategies, which is definitely required for this assignment. So in this one, she's saying that the students had a rubric that they could self-assess themselves. So here's a screenshot of the student, and you can see this column, self-evaluation. Here's the rubric, and the student's going to look and say, did I use and find 2 or more resources? And so they can score themselves, and then the teacher could also score here. So she wrote a little reflection here. Then for the third one, for assessment that accommodates differences among learners, she again is using the collaborative OWL research project. So obviously you can use the same lesson for more than one of these assessment strategies. And again, she links to the lesson plan. So she gives me a little, like, what she's doing. She's going to have them handwrite, type, or talk to text app, or this read and write computer extension. And she lists the assessment strategies, and then she actually gives some screenshots. Here's a student who hand wrote. Here's a student who typed. Here's a student who she had to read it out loud, and so they talked about this, the vocabulary they didn't understand. And here's her reflection. For the fourth one, this is where you have a record of what the student has learned, and you communicate results to the student. Again, the student used that same OWL research project, and this time the assessment strategies were, it's still that self-assessment rubric, but there's a teacher-evaluated rubric. And let's see, here, this is what I wanted to show you. This part right here in the rubric. Do you see how she gives some feedback to the student? It's that simple. Just handwritten feedback on a rubric to a student would be evidence that you use this assessment strategy. Now for number 5, this is where you're using student work, you're evaluating it to inform the effectiveness of your teaching. And so she did a pre and post test, and she described the lesson a little bit here. She gave links to the responses, and then she reflected. And she said the pre-test accuracy was 54%, the post-test 70%, and she talked about this and how she might make changes to next time. For the last one, she used a different lesson, Be a Super Digital Citizen. This lesson plans from Common Sense Media. She did some minor tweaks to it. So this assessment type is using assessment information to inform instruction if you're going to work with a student individually next, or for a future class. And as I said, if at the elementary level, this one's really easy for school librarians to do because you teach the same lesson multiple times. So what would happen is she had an exit ticket, she linked to it. Google Forms said, hey, this is they can list the frequently missed questions. And so she said she needs to go over this with the class, or in the next class, she's going to think about ways she could teach that so that kids might understand what she's trying to teach them better and be able to show it. So that's it. I urge you to go into Brightspace assignments and read the description of the assignment yourself. I also urge you to look at the rubric to see how you're going to be assessed. And I would like for you to look at, there's 2 other examples, and you can look at those examples. So take a look, and if you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you.